Welcome to Unbound. You're here for conscious chats that go deeper than your Instagram feed, where we ditch the dogma but keep it real. So let's get unbound. Hi.
Hi, Georgia.
We're back on the couch.
We're back on the couch. We're about to get unbound on the purpose of life.
Just a really casual topic for today.
Yeah, just a wee one.
Just keeping it real service.
Yes, so, we'll just cover off, like what is the point of it all? Why are we here? What is the meaning of it all? I think I had a friend recently who was going through a bit of a crunchy time. And she was just like, what is the point? Just like, what is the point? What am I doing here? Very, very frustrated with feeling directionless, feeling frustrated with the fact that the things she wanted to move forward weren't moving forward. What she had in mind wasn't playing out. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a relatable place to be. I've certainly been in those places before. So I think finding one's purpose isn't necessarily an easy thing to do or an easy thing to recognize, but we want it because it's a horrible feeling like you have inertia, feeling like you're in limbo in life, like you don't know what direction you should move in, like maybe what you're doing doesn't mean anything or isn't important. So we're just going to cover that off.
Well, there's so much I want to share on that. Firstly, there's lots of different ways of looking at purpose. So we can be looking at it as purely as a career. So your friend, for example, might be talking more about, I don't have this outlet. So at the moment, an external outlet for something that I'm doing in the world that therefore I don't have a purpose. Or someone might feel like, I'm only a mother right now, which I don't agree with that description, but we can sometimes in those moments also feel like, I'm not creating and putting something out in the world. When I look on Instagram, 22-year-olds are starting their businesses already, and I don't feel like I have a real purpose. So there are lots of layers to it. If I were to describe, what is your ultimate purpose, to put it in really simple terms, is just to find your deepest expression and connection in this moment and to be deeply receptive to it. So to get to that point where we can actually do that is obviously a bit of a journey. But when we're in this moment so deeply, it feels very fulfilling, and we're able to be receptive to creative intelligence, to what's coming through us about what is the need of the time in this moment. Now, if we do that, it feels very satisfying. It feels totally aligned. The connection is all there. And if we live life like that, moment to moment to moment, what we find is a life of meaning that comes from something that's not outside of you. Because the mistake gets made, and if we're suffering at any point, then there is generally some perception of what's happening. It's not necessarily what's happening, it's our perception of it that is causing the suffering. And sometimes that's quite a big gap, quite a big leap to let go of that perception, particularly when things are really crunchy. But that is the deeper invitation of any moment, is actually to go deeper in this moment, which means letting go of this perception that somehow there's something wrong, that I'm doing wrong, that I should be going faster than I am. And a lot of that comes down to comparison, when we have to recognize we are an individual soul on its own unique pathway. We are part of the whole, we are the whole at one layer, but we're also on a unique pathway. And it would be so boring if everyone was just doing the same old thing. That's what makes it exciting and interesting. Who do you want to talk to at a party or a lunch? Is someone who's doing something totally different to you. The person doing the same thing as you, too much unity, too same. A little bit of variety is fun. So nature also likes that variety. So that means that the pathway looks different. The pace looks different. We see, some women having a lot of success, quote unquote, or having a different level of recognition and mastery is maybe how I'd describe it in their careers much later in life. 40, 50 plus, and they're really, achieving something at that point. So that pathway is just as valid and just as enriching as a pathway where there is some kind of early recognition, and then something shifts again, you move into a different phase. So one thing that I would really encourage is pulling back from comparing your pathway to others, which is easier said than done. And I think social media, for all of its benefits that it's given us, one of the downsides is hyper comparison. The ego has a tendency to compare anyway. So it's often, this starts in childhood, and if you have siblings, you'll start immediately trying to find your place in the world with reference to another straight away. Who's getting more attention, who's getting more love, or maybe I should be more like that. And, my parents are really liking an extrovert, or they don't like the louder, more expressive child, and so maybe my expression is wrong, I need to pull it back or make it more, or we automatically start moving away from our truest expression with reference to others and what we perceive as them receiving more, ultimately love, more attention itself, has love threaded through it at the baseline. So there's this tendency to compare, which also can take us away from being deep in this moment and actually having that deepest possible connection, and then being receptive to what is the need of the time right now. What am I here for in this moment? Maybe it's not my purpose to be out on Instagram or, running a business or using up all my energy in that direction, when my purpose is to be here for this friend right now, or to be supporting my local community. Because I don't have a really busy business going on, I've actually got the time and energy and space to support others on a more local, quieter fashion that doesn't need all of that wider recognition. Not everything needs to be on Instagram, Not that necessarily that's what people are looking for, but that's often where the perception piece comes from, the comparison piece. So when we can be in deep receptivity, first of all, that brings us this deep sense of inner fulfillment. The deeper we can go with ourselves, with this moment, is where we find the fulfillment. The fulfillment isn't found outside of ourselves. That's one of the biggest mistakes that we make as humans, is constantly trying to get fulfilled. Once I get this, once I get that, once I get my purpose, even, this can be, once I find my purpose, then I'll be fulfilled. Well, no, there's lots of people who have very purposeful lives by that definition, if we're talking about career or some kind of external outlet. And they're entirely unfulfilled. They want the next thing, and they're just waiting for the next level of recognition. And they're on a treadmill that also isn't leading to actual sustained inner happiness. So we have to pull it right back from what are we really looking for with purpose? We're looking for fulfillment, ultimately. We're looking to feel good, to feel the sense of fulfillment inside, to feel happy, because we really only ever do anything to feel happy. We think that having an external purpose is going to be something that brings happiness, or else why would we chase that? So we're looking for validation, often some kind of recognition, and often, feeling happy, and we think that that's what's going to bring that to us. So we have to just step back and see, well, actually, just because I've got an external outlet that I feel connected to, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to have fulfillment. So if we start from a baseline of looking for where fulfillment is truly found, which is on the inside, we go through this period where we research, where is fulfillment? Oh, it's in a partner, it's in a job, it's in having children, it's in getting the house that I want in the right suburb, it's in the house renovation, it's in having all the things. And we can get on that treadmill, and then we realize I'm not fulfilled. I'm chasing the next thing. Even when I get the thing that I thought that I wanted, my partner, my children, can be sort of this schism inside, because there's this disappointment that I should be happier. I was told, I had the impression deeply embedded in my system that by getting this, I was going to get happy. And I'm not that happy. I'm kind of tired and stressed and exhausted. And I feel guilty about that, because I feel like I should be happier given all the things that I have, largely. We can see that. And that can kind of create this weird layer of guilt and shame around not being happier about all of the wonderful things that we have, and not being happier about being a mother to these children. There's so many layers. So it's not that those things can't bring enjoyment. and pleasure and happiness, but it tends to be of a more temporary flavor. And it also is dependent on how that thing is going. How are your children behaving today? Great. Oh, we're all happy, Larry, and it's so wonderful, and I love them. And today they're not. Today they've got a lot of feelings, and they're not going with the family schedule at all. And now I'm tearing my hair out and, thinking thoughts I wish I wasn't thinking about my children, right? So this is just natural because things don't always go the way that we think they're going to go or the way that we want them to go. So we have to recognize that anything outside of ourselves is the field of change. It's consistent change. So we're not going to get lasting fulfillment from anything that is consistently changing, because then what we're going to try and do is try to control the external circumstances into what we think. Once I get my purpose, once I get the children to this, once I get, enough support for my child that has this difficulty, then we're all going to get to this point. And what we tend to find is that point just doesn't arrive. We don't get to this point where it's all just smooth sailing and happy Brady Bunch families, So that's when we start to ask the question, what's the point of it all? Why doesn't this feel better than I thought it would? Why am I not happy with all of these things? Particularly living in the West, we are so blessed. We're so privileged with, on the whole, the life that we're living, though there's challenging circumstances and everyone has experienced, trauma and challenge in their own ways. But if we look at our life compared with, what the global situations are, there is so much privilege and so much to be grateful for. So why can't we access that? Stress is a big piece. We have to be taking care of stress. But also conceptually recognizing that the truth is that happiness isn't found outside. It doesn't mean that we don't desire relationships, that we don't want to be a parent, that we don't want to find an outlet to express our gifts and skills and abilities in a particular way. But if we are looking for our meaning in that, our fulfillment in that, we're going to be disappointed, because the deeper truth is, which is what the ancient wisdom traditions expound, is that we can only find fulfillment inside. Then the next question comes, which is, if we find the fulfillment inside, then why do we just not care about the outside? Does it become well, what's the point of all of that then? It's the point where we find the sweet spot of existence is where we can have 200% happiness, as we like to say in this tradition. 100% on the inside, 100% fulfillment, 100% happiness on the outside. Without the inside stability, the outside, we're at the whim of what the circumstances are, which, as we know, are consistently changing. So the inner layer, when we start to awaken to that, which is primarily through meditation, is what I recommend. It's been the pathway that supported me the most, is that awakening to that layer, taking my attention there, having it stabilized there, and recognizing, starting to experience that state of inner fulfillment, which comes on as this feeling that, I feel better about everything. I'm not chasing everything so much. There are still things that I desire. There's lots of activity, things that I'm moving forward, moving towards creating, but I'm not now desperately attached to it because it's not my only source of happiness. It's not my primary purpose. I recognize through the deep enrichment of that feeling, that exposure to self on the inside, baseline being, which is that inner fulfillment state, that actually is primary. That is the best experience. That is the one that brings the most fulfillment, and it stabilizes, it can stay there all the time. Then it's giving you this buffer against all of the change, all of the ups and downs of daily life. And then when we go into these experiences, whether it be job or career or whatever we're doing on a day-to-day basis, relationships, family, general life, then the way that we express into that is from a state of growing fulfillment. And the fulfillment then gets expressed through the experience, but is not found in the experience. And so this is the distinction, that the first absolute piece that we need to understand when it comes to purpose is the primary purpose that we have is internal. So there is a word in Sanskrit, which is the language that is used in the Vedic tradition, which is Dharma. And Dharma means your evolutionary role, in your personal role in the evolution of things. And so there are actually 3 forms of Dharma. The primary Dharma, and we see this in the astrological chart in the way that it's laid out, first house is all about you. Number 1, primary Dharma is deepening your relationship with self and going beyond it being just this body, but deeper into that vertical relationship, connecting in this moment deeper and deeper and deeper over your lifetime, progressing in that way. Because when you do that, the rest of the chart, the rest of life comes into balance. If that first house is not strong, it's not progressing, the other ones start to go out of balance. So it's interesting the way the chart holds so much knowledge as well, the structure of the chart, which is reflected in all the rest of the timeless wisdom of these traditions. So that is our primary Dharma. If we don't take care of that, our relationships will be a mess, because we're always going to, as we dived into our relationship episode, is that how we are with ourselves will then, of course, reflect in the relationship, of course. So the more fulfilled we are in ourselves, the more healthy our relationships are going to be. Less needy, less likely to need or want to engage in unhealthy dynamics. That is a natural outcome of that. So again, how we are within ourselves is going to also determine how much capacity we're going to have to show up with, if we do have an outlet, work, career, what we're creating in the world. If we've found that outlet, if we happen to have found it, if it's been relevant for us to have found it so far or be engaged in that way, then how the quality of that, the staying power that we have, the adaptability, the balance in our nervous system, because we're starting to recognize with burnout being such an issue now, if we just push forward, maybe we have got that channel and we're really connected to it, we're really passionate about it, but we're not taking care of this, of self, then we get burnt out because we're doing it in an unsustainable way. So it's also about awakening to that inner wisdom, that inner connection that tells us, and paying attention to those signals, which is that receptivity to the moment rather than just overriding all of that, which is right now I'm going too hard. I'm doing too much. I'm out of balance. My nervous system, my body is screaming at me for rest, for slowing down, for changing something up. But if we ignore that, then again, we're going to become lopsided and something's going to take its toll. Yes, we might be creating amazing things in the world, but our relationships will be a mess. Our children are disappointed with us because we're not giving them much attention. Body is breaking down, all of the things. So the primary Dharma is always your connection with self.
Okay. Can I jump in with something? Because something just sprung to mind about like being a kid.
Yes.
And trying to figure out like what was special about me. Mm. And I suppose that's in like, I suppose that part of that is comparison, but like what is special about me compared to everyone else? But in a way it was like trying to figure out like what are the kind of gifts, I suppose, that I would innately bring into the world, and then how can I find something where I can use those things. But first it was like, what are the things?
Yes.
And I guess that's that relationship with self, but as a kid or as a young person trying to figure out, well, what is special about me? What are my gifts? What is the area that I'm supposed to move forward in?
I think as well, when we're really staying connected to self, and that through parenting, consciously parenting children, where you're highlighting what you can see and recognize in that child. And
that wasn't the parenting that happened in the 80s.
No, that was not the 80s parenting, but hopefully that's where we're moving towards. And if we're talking about kind of going forward, that ideal is, that each individual soul that's showing up in a body, it's a unique soul on its own pathway. And so the parent is there to merely reflect back to the child, not to direct, not to overlay, not to project, which we saw happening in previous generations a little bit more. And of course, that still happens in various pockets, but not to project what I, as the parent, think this child should be or do, or even what society thinks they should be or do, or what their peers are doing, or what their sibling is doing, or is good at, or likes to do. But what is this child naturally interested in? What is their natural expression? It's actually not a big, hard question. It's right there. But what we're trying often to do is to make that something else, or to try to figure out and go too many steps ahead, when all there really needs to be as a child is just a time of playful exploration and curiosity about life, which children naturally are. They naturally have different interests at different times. And we don't really, as a parent, we don't really need to curate that. We're more providing opportunities for them to explore themselves, which is what we would have wanted, right? So we give that which we want to receive, which is we want freedom, we want curiosity. This is a time where there is actually time in your life as a child and as a teenager, more time and more opportunities to explore different things. I think when I was at school, I was doing more activities, more creative pursuits, more artistic or cultural pursuits than I have at any other time in my life, which is actually a fertile ground for discovering that which you are really interested in. If we look at where I am at right now, I wasn't going to be a spiritual teacher or interested in conscious wisdom at 9 or 12. There's nothing to see there. I was playing the flute, I was in theatre. There was no real pointer to that's where I was going. But really, when we think about a journey of going deeper with self, that will only ever lead you to the pathway that you're meant to find at a particular point in time, if you're meant to find such a pathway. Because if you're free to be yourself, if you're learning to recognize what you're naturally drawn towards, and there isn't some kind of barrier that either you're creating or someone around you and outside of you is creating, you might unwind that later. I certainly did. It took a long time to come out of doing what I thought I should be doing, what I thought my parents wanted me to do, and those weren't even really conscious thoughts that I had. They were things that I realized after the fact, when I'd got far enough down the road, that I was like, oh, that was ultimately why I did all of those things, although they felt natural and the natural next step at the time. But that was based on where my state of consciousness was at the time. So the importance of this connection with self. So, if we're talking about parenting and you're like, well, I want my child to have the freedom to be themselves, then it really just looks like letting them explore and encouraging whatever it is they feel. I want to join the circus. Okay, great. Well, let's see if that's possible right now. Maybe you can't go to the circus, but we could go to circus classes, and that might be an interest that fades. But it wasn't really about them becoming a circus performer. What that value of that experience was exploration, was curiosity, was learning to follow their own curiosity. But so often we grew up with a lot of no's and a lot of restriction and narrow-minded thinking. So we can sometimes, have that overlay where we go into that habitual mode of like, oh no, you can't be, because we're thinking as our parents were thinking, and we're sort of just stuck in that habitual rut, maybe for a moment where we suddenly go, oh wait, no, I'm being my mother or my father here. That doesn't lead to money. That doesn't lead to a job. Or I don't want my kid to be a circus performer. That'd be kind of embarrassing for me. So what I'm going to do is, sort of neg out on this and push them slightly loving, controlling in another direction. So in that process, we will discover more about ourselves as the parent as well. Like, what are my preconceived ideas? Often children will come and challenge that for you to grow as well, for you to see where you're staying narrow, where some of your thinking is habitual rather than more open and expansive, and again, receptive to the moment. And children are very receptive to the moment. They're far more free. And so if we can allow that to flourish a little bit more, that's also really supportive.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one as a parent to think about, because I want my kids, and in fact, my daughter is trying circus stuff at the moment. So, I would be disappointed if one of my children didn't run off to the circus. I think that's essential for at least one of them. But yeah, I think as a parent, I want them to be curious, and I want them to explore, and I want them to try different things. I also want to teach them the value of like perseverance and sticking with something and understanding, like getting that sense of getting better at something because they've stuck at it and they've had that sort of staying power and then feel the achievement of that progression and know that they can stick with something and progress. And so there's that kind of balance of, okay, I want them to learn the value of that perseverance. I also want them to have, the ability to make choices and discern what direction they want to go in and what they're curious about and what they want to explore. So sometimes that feels like a difficult one to
I think it's
navigate.
A fine balance, but also, it's sometimes quite useful to put yourself in the child's shoes or to think back. I played the flute. Now, it really has never been relevant at any point in life. I never played in an orchestra. I don't have a flute. I never picked up a flute after my lessons. So if I'd gone to my mum and just said at the time, I'm not really into this, there is a certain element of forcing a child to do something that they don't want to do, which can lead them to stay in things too long past the point of relevance. So there is a balance there, and even asking the child and kind of getting them to reflect back to see what they feel about it and to recognize, if you go through a few things and they haven't found anything, you can say, well, would you like to just try something? Maybe it's not going to be the thing that you love, but to see just if you can get better at that one thing, is there one thing that you feel, really like to do? So sometimes some children are going to just naturally need to go through more things and they're going to be more explorative and they'll pick up and put down more things. And other children will be more, inclined in one particular direction. So there's no rule book here. It comes down to really tuning in without your own overlay of like, well, I want them to stick at something or I want them to get good at something. Well, there's no point getting good at something they don't like because they're just, as soon as they've got any freedom, they're going to ditch that. And then they're just going to resent you from having forced them. Then you've spent money on something and also taken up time where they could have found something that they liked more. So I know often parents will tell me, they're so excited when they find something the child does really like, and then, they really want to encourage it because it can be hard also to find a thing that certain children are into. So I think the important thing is to really encourage curiosity, play, let it be enjoyable. Because we often get too perfectionistic around things as adults, where we want it to be about getting good. We want it to be about something, producing something, and we're getting into that productivity culture where we've often lost a lot of the sense of play that we once had. And so I think it's also important to foster play as being of innate value in and of itself. So they're playing at something, maybe they're not going to be any good at it, but they're just having fun with it, and to really encourage and let it be about play for them and let their mind go on to, did they have fun? What was the most fun part, rather than, did you get all the notes right, or what did your teacher say about it? So not making it so achievement focused, because when we're really passionate about something, we end up becoming good at it. Because we stick with it, because we get passionate about it, then the natural next step is to want to improve within it. And if we're passionate about it, we'll have staying power with it anyway. So sometimes it can be useful to redirect things onto being about passion, play, curiosity, exploration, fun, rather than it can be that adult overlay of achievement orientation. And that also is a huge piece that holds people back from finding something that they can really express through. When I was starting to move out of, I'd had this cognition that insurance was not where I was meant to be. I shared this in the first episode. Jump back and listen to that, my story in greater depth. But I immediately was like, why am I in insurance? This is not my passion. And I don't think we always have to find a passion. There can be something that we're passionate about that we're doing outside of work, and work is the funding mechanism. So that's not going to be true for all people, but spontaneously arising within me at that time was, I really want to go to work and feel passionate and inspired. And I had this real drive towards finding something that I could be passionate about that I could also earn money from. And if that's relevant for you, you will start to have that desire coming up. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I had to really recognize that I couldn't think about it from what would make money, because if I go down the money route, we're already in the head, we're already thinking, calculating, we're moving away from passion, inspiration, play, and into logic, linear, and we're still on that track of what the known pathways are as well, which we've probably already explored. We already know what the known pathways are. So I went down instead, if I want to feel passionate, I need to enliven passion within myself, passion within my experience of life, playfulness. So I went through the pathway of looking at, well, what did I enjoy as a child? Because I'd become so divorced from that. I'd got into what will make money, and I'd done the research on that. I'd been in a career that made a lot of money, and I had always thought, well, that funds my lifestyle and do lots of travel, and I get to live a life that I enjoy. But I was also really exhausted, and I was starting to feel real aversion to going in there. I just couldn't be bothered anymore talking about another mining portfolio, which nothing wrong with that. Just for me, that was what was coming up. And so I knew that I didn't have much play in my life. Or I wasn't doing anything for play. Everything was productivity orientated. Even my weekends, it was like a checklist of I'm going to go to the beach and I'm going to read my book and then I want to make sure I get to this. And it was all about doing, and getting stuck in the doing is not where we find passion or inspiration or flow, and there's so much rigidity and narrowness to it. There's also not any space for something out of the box to come in because we're so hyper scheduled. So I started to play around with, and I'd started meditating, which I think was where all this inspiration came from, which was I need to create more space in my life. I need more space in my weekends. I'm not going to structure anything. I'm going to do things that are purely for fun, that aren't productivity orientated or leading me towards making money. And so I was like, right, what did I enjoy doing as a child? Okay, I enjoyed singing. I enjoyed horse riding. I enjoyed making up little dances, and none of these things obviously were going to lead to a career. But I was like, I'm just going to do these things to see what it awakens in me. And so I started horse riding every weekend, which I, kept going with for a while. I went to a singing class and I was like, oh no, I think I actually just prefer singing in the car and singing. I don't really want to be in a structured environment with this. So I was learning things, but it was awakening play and curiosity and passion inside me, and I had more space in my weekends, so I was moving with what I felt to do in the moment rather than the thinking, planning, the analytical mind. So I would, play around with, okay, now I feel like doing this. Now I feel like going to that cafe and getting a coffee, and then I'd run into someone and have a really interesting chat, and the next thing would flow, and it opened up so much more for me because I was now, as I mentioned, more receptive to where nature really wanted to lead me because I'd opened. I was receiving what is the signal, what do I feel now in this moment and this moment and this moment. And some of the things would align with the things that if I had planned my weekend, I would probably find myself doing. But also connections were made, conversations were sparked that wouldn't have happened because I needed to be able to be moved into that moment at that time. And then I was kind of wandering Bondi Beach and I was just pondering, what do I really like doing? Like if I could just do one thing, just not about money, just if I could do one thing, that would be inspiring to me. And the answer that came to me, and I was really tuning into, rather than thinking of the answer, opening to just allow anything to come at any time, no attachment to timing or outcome on the answer. And the answer that came was have spiritual conversations. So I was kind of obsessed with that at the time. My consciousness was expanding and all I really wanted to do was take in conscious material, talk to people more on that level. I felt like that my system was really craving it. And I was like, but that's not a job. Like, I can't make money from that, was the first thought that came. And I was like, oh, well, we'll just let that sit there and marinate and see what comes. And I was moving really with moment by moment actions that all ended up leading down that pathway to obviously where I got to this. But it was never planned. I never planned it out. And it was only through being really open, really receptive, and moving step by step. And the way that nature really operates, one of the barriers to discovering one of the other types of Dharma, and we talked about the primary type being that connection with self. The secondary Dharma is your moment by moment Dharma. So what is the next right action in this moment? So if those two are in alignment, you will naturally find the third type of Dharma, which is where you find something that you might be doing on a more regular or consistent basis as a way to serve and offer your gifts and skills and abilities into the world, because the first two will just take care of the third. But where we're often trying to go is straight to the third. The other two are way out of balance, and then we're not going to get clarity on that. So it can be a lot smoother and a lot more intelligent and sophisticated if we go through the other route, which I just naturally found myself doing. And this is the way that
you got to the third one.
I got to the third one through, as we call it sometimes, that breadcrumb process. And that's really what it often is. The first step gets revealed, but you have to step onto that step for the next step to arise. What people are wanting, usually when I'm mentoring, they want the full pathway, and they want to also see where it's going to end up. Is it going to be successful?
Chapter?
How much money will I make from that? Will everyone love me? Will it all be great? But you're not going to get any of that. You're going to get the first step. If you stay on the shore, looking at that step and thinking about it, none of the other steps will reveal. So you have to you're co-creating with your own self, which is, if I take that step, I'm showing up for this process. And I'm willing to take the perceived risk, though I think in truth it's far riskier to stay on the shore in the known, because it's going to attract some force to shunt you in the direction that you really are meant to be going. So let's be proactive. Take the step. So for me, that first step was saying yes to this feeling that I'm going to leave insurance, because I could tell that was wrong, it was out of alignment. I had no idea what I was going to do, where I'd make money from. I didn't have any big bank of savings to really lean back on. But I just knew that that feeling was so strong now that I had to follow it. So I hadn't even resigned, but I'd said a firm yes inside my consciousness. So I was like, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm not wavering. There's no energy around, maybe I will, maybe I won't. It was a certainty. Yes, I'm leaving, but what will be the most respectful pathway that honours the path that I've had in this company? That will be to see it through to a particular point in time. So I made a plan around how it would happen, but I'd said yes. Then open receptivity, starting to explore, starting to play, starting to ponder and ask those questions, starting to create space in my awareness. And this may not be what other people's pathway looks like, but there are certainly some mechanics here which are universal, which is that we're not going to see the full pathway. We're never really going to be sure how it's going to go. And we're not really going to be sure how it unfolds. But can we get the first step? Yes. So if we can just pull it right back, let go of the need to know, and be open to receiving direction in the moment, deeply receptive in that moment. And of course, I recommend having a practice, because the more stress there is, the more noise there is in your head, the less clarity, the less inner stability to take what is perceived to be a risk at the time, though really is never a risk when we're moving in an aligned direction. But I couldn't have done that at any earlier stage. There was no coincidence around the fact that that all happened after I learned to meditate. And yes, it did end up leading to me being a meditation teacher and a teacher of, conscious wisdom, but it could have been leading anywhere.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I've just been thinking about how children can be such great teachers for their parents, because that part that you said about projecting our adult ideas onto children in terms of progress up through the levels, get better and better. If you go into that, you should be trying to win at it, What is the mark of success in that area? And I think we forget so much that it really should be about play and that feeling of aliveness that you get from doing something that you love and enjoy. And there's been a couple of things that my kids have said to me about their activities, and one was my daughter recently has stopped going to drumming lessons, And, you know, I was like, I really want her to, like, she's very good at drumming. Like, I really want her to keep
And I'm
drumming.
sure you've bought a drum kit.
We bought the drum kit.
It's all been invested in.
Yes, it's now sitting in the corner. But she also does this, like, drumming club, which is more, it's called, like, djembe drums, which is more kind of like, I'm sure this is a very reductive way to say it, but it's more like a bongo drum type of situation. And she's loving that. And I was like, well, you know, are you sure you want to give up the drums? Because your teacher said you're naturally very good at the drums, you know. And she's like, yeah, but Mum, when I said I wanted to learn the drums, it was because I just thought it'd be a fun thing to do for a while. And I was like, oh, damn it, she's got a point. Whereas
so much wisdom in that.
I know.
Why can't
and
that
then
just
you have
be a fun thing to do for a while? Because also as adults, that is, when I'm talking to people who are, you know, whatever age, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus, we're often so held back by that point, and that all starts in childhood, of there's no just doing something for fun for a period of time. Hardly ever do I hear that anyone has that intention. It's always like, well, what I don't want to spend money on it, and this is where money becomes the barrier as well. I don't want to spend money on something that I'm not going to continue with. But what if you just did it for a while and it had some value for you in that moment, which then was actually the stepping stone to the next thing? Because without realizing or going down the pathway, some of the pathway is often through exploration of things that don't, quote unquote, work out. Or you find that I like drumming, but really not this type, more this type of drumming. And that is actually a refinement in your pathway. And whether she becomes a drummer or not is kind of irrelevant, but she's learning to refine her own process, to follow her own feeling of what really inspires her. Because as we get down the pathway further, it's going to be, oh, I do actually like this element, but not this element. So I'm going to move more in that direction. I don't want to throw away the whole industry or the whole skill, but it's more in this direction where I find for me is that real, you know, spark of passion and
that
curiosity.
That sense of being alive, when something makes you feel alive. And I think that was a real moment.
And when it feels effortless.
It feels effortless, and you don't feel like, oh, I've got to practice. You're like, no, I just turn up at 8, we drum for a while, and then I go on with my day. Like, it's fun. And I think, you know, it really highlights, why are we placing more value on something where you think there's going to be some kind of achievement or recognition over something that makes you feel alive? The other thing that the other humbling moment, of which there are many as a parent, was when we had her doing martial arts. We had her doing jiu-jitsu, which was convenient because both the kids were doing jiu-jitsu. And you know, and I certainly would love for her to have a good handle on martial arts, just because through life. But then again, she came and she went, I want to quit jiu-jitsu. And I'm thinking she's got to learn to persevere, you know, she's got to learn to stick with something. And we were sort of talking about this, and she goes, the thing is, Dad, sorry, I'm just dropping him in it. Dad made a decision about my body that I didn't agree to when he signed me up for jiu-jitsu. And I was like, oh my God, you're 8.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's it. You can't.
You've got me at that.
You've got me. And I was like, okay, absolutely fine. And I think now with this conversation, it really puts me at I mean, I love that when I'm like, oh, so clearly, let's go with her decision on this. But it is that thing that we didn't get taught as kids of, let's allow you to develop the ability to discern what feels right within you and for you and the direction you want to move in. And let's take away our perception of what we think is most valuable or important for you to do. Because
they are learning to speak up for themselves. They're learning to set boundaries. Those were also things that we generally, on the whole, some people might have had some very evolved parents in the 80s and 90s, but on the whole, that was quite hard to find. That is what we're learning at that point. It's possible to learn it then. We don't need to learn it at 20 and 30 and 40 when we go to therapy. We can actually be modelled it early and start to, you know, speak up. And so there are obviously certain boundary lines that you're going to have to set as a parent, and children also need to learn to respond to others' boundaries. So it's not like a free-for-all where there's absolute chaos and there's no boundaries and the child just runs everything, but it's also within the range of what they do have some control over, some say, and that's a really fertile ground for them to learn to express and choose and feel the consequences of their own choices. Like if they quit, jiu-jitsu, and then her brother gets really good at it, and in a year's time she comes to you and says, "Oh, Mum, my brother's really good at jiu-jitsu and I'm not really good at it, and I kind of wished I'd kept going." The true moment of that, the true meaning of that moment is not she should have kept going, is that she got to learn that if I don't keep going with something, I won't get good at it. Now, she probably is never going to come and say that. She's very clear.
She's running off the circus now. She doesn't care,
But say that happened, that's a really fantastic opportunity, which is not where you jump in as a parent and be like, "I told you so, I did tell you this at the time." Just say, "Oh, yeah, well, how does that make you feel? Oh, isn't that interesting to look at what happens if we, let go of something too early? What might you want to do differently next time where it's just free of any judgment?" But she's learning such a potent lesson at a time where the stakes are not that high, so that later she can, make that choice for herself. With the next thing, she's like, she might say to you, "I kind of want to give it up because, little Jeanette is better than me," or "I don't like this," or "I feel tired afterwards." And you can say, "Well, how do you feel? Remember with jiu-jitsu, you didn't want to keep going with it, but then you found you hadn't got very good at it. Do you feel like that's something that could happen?" Or you can help her explore her own process when you're not involved in it. You don't have any agenda except supporting her to see what's right for her. So those are really, amazing ways you as a parent can support your child to start, learning how to meet the moment, learning how to trust themselves in the moment as well. That's a huge piece.
And I suppose as well, kids don't have the agency to make a huge amount of choices about what's happening to them through most of their life. Like, you have to go to school. You have to. It might not be fun, but you have to go to school. So I guess when it comes to like extracurricular activities, that's their space that they can do that. A friend of mine recently, I've got a couple of friends in this space actually, going to therapy. The therapist said to them, like, your job is to find the things that bring you joy, that spark joy in you, and follow that path. Because it's that, like, you've forgotten how to play thing, and this is a piece that's missing. And so I was talking to one of my friends about this, and about how we need to follow the popping candy, the things that feel like popping candy. But also, because in like adult life, there's so many demands on us. If you're doing your job, which sometimes just feels like a funding mechanism, because maybe that's not popping candy for you, and probably won't be for lots of people, that you can be quite afraid, like when life can be exhausting, like maybe there's a lot of demands on you, to then bring in another thing that you think that's also going to drain your energetic resources. But I think when you find the popping candy thing, that's actually kind of a boost.
Well, yes, but what I would say if someone came to me and said, "I'm really exhausted, I feel like, yes, I want to spark joy, but I just don't feel like I even want to bring another thing in," then I would say let's come back to primary Dharma first, which is taking care of you. You need to balance your system first. Don't even chase the popping candy. It's only going to exhaust you more at this point. You have no capacity within your nervous system to even feel the pop. You're just flatlined. So what we need to do is take care. You need more rest. You might need to let something go. You might need to ask for more help. You might need to bring in a self-regulation technique. If we don't take care of the primary Dharma, then the other two are not going to flow. So we come back to there is an order. The order is one. Primary Dharma is self, not external output first. There's a reason why those houses flow in that order, which is one, primary Dharma is the self. If you're not taking care of yourself, it doesn't matter what purpose or passion you have, you won't have any energy for it, and you'll be getting burned out. And also, we need to look at what is the wider question around why you're not taking care of yourself in this, because there's some trauma response there. There's some lack of deserving power around, I deserve to feel well while I do these things. I deserve to feel energized. I deserve rest. I deserve time out. All of those things. I deserve help. I deserve to ask for help from others. There will be a lot of pieces that probably fall into those boxes that we need to take care of first. So primary Dharma, self-connection, vertical relationship. Then when that is in balance, we start moving moment by moment and exploring and seeing being receptive to that moment, seeing what's showing up, what's sparking curiosity, and being open to go down a pathway that doesn't look perfect. Because I think a lot of, particularly women, I don't know so much for men, but women are often on that pathway of, I've got to be the good girl and do it perfectly and do what others expect of me. And you're not going to find very easily an outlet that's more external where you get to offer your skills and gifts and abilities if you haven't found it already. Sometimes people just find a natural pathway. They're always going to become a doctor and they had that initial early on inspiration and that they're in that line. But that doesn't mean that they're learning about life through other pathways and that pathway just happened to have, early inspiration. But if we're looking, we haven't really found it, we're not going to find it if we're trying to do what others expect of us, if we're not willing to upset a few people along the way and to break down and away from, our limited thinking around what that could be or what it could look like. Because this pathway for me wasn't even on the agenda. It wasn't at Careers Day, that's for sure. Neither was podcasting at the time. We're also on a technological precipice where the introduction of AI has shifted things so dramatically and will continue to do so that there are going to be jobs that we don't even know of yet. So we can't think our way there. We have to be moving from that inner inspiration that already, the part of us that knows the pathway is planting the seeds. So we can't think our way there. It's not at the level of the mind. It's at that baseline layer. And all it's going to give us is the next signal, because why do we not get the full pathway and get to see the whole thing and how it's all going to turn out? Because part of that journey that we're going to go on is actually about the expansion, primary Dharma, expansion of self-connection, deepening our relationship with life. We'll have to move through fear and resistance, and the letting go of those is actually just as important as whatever the outcome's going to be. It's what you learn about yourself along the way. It's the process that unfolds. For me, as I shared, my dad went white and was devastated for a few days once he learned I was quitting my,
nice,
high-paying
career
job to become a meditation teacher, which would be probably one of the last things that he would have wanted any child of his to do. But my life isn't about him. It's about me. He got to bring me up. He gets to witness this whole journey. And he's also learning something from that by all three of his daughters not really being in any box that he thought they were going to be in. So
none of you have bothered with convention.
Yes, not really. So we're all relatively unconventional, I guess, if we look by the previous generation standards, which they weren't a particularly happy or connected generation on the whole. So why would we look there? But his pathway, he is learning through witnessing that and through seeing what happens around him, though he may not be doing it himself, but he's standing by witnessing that ever-expanding process that's happening in front of him with all of his daughters. So it's interesting the way nature arranges things.
The way it just unfolds bit by bit. And because, I could never have ended up podcasting. Well, one...
It didn't exist.
It didn't exist back when I finished school and everyone was making decisions about what they were going to do next. And two, I actually needed all the parts of the story that took place to lead me to that point where that naturally became the next step in an evolution. But it was through relationships had to form, projects had to be completed, all these different
you had to get divorced.
I had to get divorced.
Of the wisdom and the experience that you had, which regularly comes up when you're talking with guests on your show, and that is a unique perspective also that you bring to the pod. So you're so right about the pathway being so relevant in the process. And for me, we could look back and go, well, why was insurance relevant? But there were so many skills that I learned through that experience, which there were relationships and networks made. I had to public speak. I'd lived a very corporate life, which means that when people come to learn to meditate from me, I can speak in a way that they can relate to. I learned this practice while I was in corporate, so I know what it feels like to try and integrate it into a busy life, and people trust me because of that. They don't want to really, I find, often hear from someone who, is 23 and they are a yoga teacher and they haven't really got the busy life that comes from having, the pressures of corporate life and the pressures on time and the KPIs and being in the office, and really understanding that has really helped me to help others. So, and it supported me while I had cancer and, needed to have stability at that time. But then the relevance of that ended. So we have to be able to let go at a certain point when something is no longer relevant as well, which is, what children are learning is when the relevance is up also. It's okay to let go because it doesn't need to look perfect. If you're loving Unbound and would like to tap in a little deeper, my membership space Pocket Guru is your ideal next step. It's super accessible, daily wisdom notes dropping into your pocket via WhatsApp Monday to Friday, but just 15 to 20 minutes of audio. Like a mini pod, but more intimate. Hear how this wisdom really comes to life in the context of real life niggles. Ask your questions anonymously, listen on the go, and join a vibrant community of over 200 members. I'd love to see you inside via the link in the show notes or via my Instagram bio @GV Meditation.
It's okay to convince your parents that they also need to let go.
Yes.
I'm interested to hear what you think about the 5-year plan, because I remember I used to run a large farming operation with my ex-husband, and one of our kind of advisors was like, where's the 5-year plan? What's the 5-year plan? And every part of me just wanted to reject that whole concept. Like I found it annoying, because I'm like, but look back, you couldn't have predicted in the last 5 years all of the things that were going to take place. It's just not that predictable. How can you possibly predict in the next 5 years all the things that are going to take place? And then it just felt like if I did a 5-year plan, I was going to set myself up for having to just throw it in the bin or failure, because you just don't know what's coming.
Exactly. So, and if you tried to set a 5-year plan 5 years ago, then AI is coming along, your 5-year plan's out the window for anyone really, because the way that it's going to unfold is going to dramatically change. So I think that vision is very useful, a long-term vision that you're working towards if you are engaged in something, or even if it's a faint idea of what the types of things are that you want to experience or the way that you want to express. If we're talking about a business or a career, to have, a high-level vision of what you'd really like to move towards, because it helps move things in that direction when we've got that clarity of vision. But sometimes the clarity of the vision needs time to foment. It needs time to come into greater detail. So I was just doing an astrology session with 2 women this week, and they're both in the 28 to 30 range, which is when Saturn return comes. And Saturn return is when the Saturn wherever it was positioned at the time of your birth has gone through its full transit of roughly 28 years back to the position where it was. So it's in the same position, which gives it an energetic impact. And generally at that time, anyone listening who's at that age is going to find this, is that we start asking questions about life. We start questioning things. And it can be a little bit confusing or even scary to be questioning things and thinking, have I been doing it all wrong? Maybe I want to start everything again. What's the purpose of this? I'm unsure about everything that I've been doing and what I'm going to be doing next. And in nature's intelligence, that's actually a really important time. It's good to question things. It's good to challenge assumptions. I've been doing something for a while, but now Saturn's come along to really realign you onto the path where you're really meant to be. But you're not going to necessarily get that information straight away. So one of them was asking, I'm thinking about these two things. And I said, well, those threads are really aligned with your chart of what you've come here to express. I'm not going to tell her what to do or where it's necessarily going, but I said, you're completely on the right track. Where you are right now is you're meant to be exploring, you're meant to be questioning. Questioning is a good thing. So if we think, oh no, I'm questioning everything, that's wrong, that can create confusion and fear. But if we know that, okay, that's where I'm meant to be, and I said, you're just at the start of the Saturn return. Saturn's just literally moved right now into Pisces. And so this is a 2.5 year period. So we're just at the start, so we're probably not going to have the full answer right now. So let it unfold. You've got some threads there, they're really on track, and see what continues to come. The questioning is important, because if we're not questioning, we're not going to discover. So it's not that sometimes the clarity isn't there yet. Sometimes it's refining, and sometimes it's entirely changing. And so all of these things are relevant depending on how your particular journey is unfolding at that time. For me, in terms of, running this business, which, is dharmic for me, I'm, living my purpose, but also it creates, financial flow for me. The vision is constantly refining itself. What I thought it might look like 9 years ago when it all began has shifted dramatically. I never really thought I'd do a podcast. I never really thought I'd train teachers. I really wait until I have the true inspiration come up inside of me. I don't like to operate from thinking level where I plan in the mind. Firstly, I think a lot of the time it's a waste of time because we spend so much time planning, and then we have to throw the plan out because something shifts. Where we're going to get inspiration that's going to be timelessly relevant is going to be that inner feeling. So that inner feeling comes, then it is always going to put you just in the right place at the right time. And people say, oh, how did you know that was going to happen? I didn't. I remember this flight situation happened in India, and we were on retreat, and people were saying, oh, you should, lots of the flights are getting cancelled. There's lots of fog, and you should, to be safe, take a car. The car ride is kind of 5.5 hours. And my fine level of feeling was just like, nah, the flight's going to be fine. Most people just cancelled their flights and booked cars, and that, I didn't really feel like doing that, but I could just feel. Now, there's no way to know what the fog's going to do. And people start thinking, oh, well, the logical thing to do is to do what? And so I think so often we'll just go with the safest option, what seems like the best option, and rules out all of the potential time delays and all of that. But where we get just that instant knowingness is actually the smoothest path. Not a lot of thinking required. Immediately, my signal is flight's going to be fine. I won't waste any time cruising to the airport. It's a very short flight. It's 45 minutes. Saved a lot of time, no rescheduling. Everyone's scrambling to kind of do, remake plans. And I was like, I don't feel like I need to do any of that. It just is smoother. So for me, I prefer, because I also understand the mechanics and I've practiced with this, and I encourage you to kind of just start playing around with tuning into your fine level of feeling and doing it on smaller things so that you build up a level of trust with it, whereby when it comes to something that could be a little bit more challenging like that, because the fear will come up, the mind will come in, you're watching what other people are doing, you can get led into the herd through that. Then you've had enough practice where you have the courage to go with your own fine level of feeling. And then you do it again in that moment and you see how it works out. And that also builds strength for you moving forward from there. But, that is how I like to operate in life, because I found that is the pathway which feels the most satisfying. When you follow that fine level of feeling, nature's wanting you, nature being your higher self, creative intelligence, the universe itself, which is also you. It's not outside of you. It's that higher aspect of you. It's the more intelligent, sophisticated part of you, the more expansive part of you. That part of you is wanting you to move in that direction. So there is this kind of reward that comes when you move in that aligned direction, when you follow that fine level of feeling, where you get this sense of upliftment on the inside, this little feeling that, yes, this is it. That aliveness comes, that feeling of freedom, love, passion, flow, ease, which is nature's reward for you moving in the direction that furthers evolution for you and the whole. Because when you move in an aligned way, that's ultimately what it's about. It's not about you getting happy. It's not about you getting what you want. It's about you performing your evolutionary role in things. And that evolutionary role serves the whole. It doesn't cut off the whole. It doesn't damage the whole. It doesn't damage any being or any layer of existence. It only serves it. It only enhances it. So there's so many reasons why, of course, nature is just cheering you on, moving in that direction, because there's a sense of finally, she, they are on track. Finally, someone's listening to, their higher purpose, what those functions that nature needs to be performed. Someone's showing up to help that person out. That function needed to be performed, but everyone else was too busy, didn't want to stop. No, I've got to stay with my plan for today. My 5-year plan doesn't involve stopping to help this person because I don't have time for that. So I think vision is important, but also recognizing that there's going to be a relevance to the timing, which brings us to also astrology, which really helps us get clarity around the timing often. So we'll dive into that.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Because, when you're talking about that inner upliftment, sometimes I feel that about a new pair of sneakers.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, yes, it is that genuine inspiration of this is, there's a propulsion in a direction which is going to take me to the next breadcrumb, which is going to take me to the next breadcrumb. And there's that sense of like that personal journey and that evolution. But sometimes there's quite an exciting feeling, like when you want something and and you want to get it, and they can feel similar.
Well, I think once you start to get that feeling where it feels like it's true for you, it feels naturally inspiring. It doesn't feel exciting, I would say. It's more of a settled, grounded, fine feeling. Excitatory, why are we excited? It's a bit feverish. It's a bit grippy. It's a bit sticky.
I do like new sneakers.
I had to get them. I had to have them. Even when, and I've really over time refined my charm radar around shopping, because I used to stress shop. When I worked in insurance, I would get stressed and I'd go out at lunchtime and maybe buy a few things. But it felt feverish. It felt like I didn't have freedom over it, like I didn't have control over it. And I'd get this sort of dopamine hit, but then kind of drop down and then need to get another hit from somewhere else. Versus now when something is really charming, even when it comes to shopping, there is I could take it or leave it feeling. Very genuine, not just my mind saying, I could take it and leave it, but I want it. I don't get the spike of dopamine when I buy something now. There's just this natural feeling like, oh, that was always coming, and I'll witness it to see to what extent am I buying things when I don't really need them, when the true charm wasn't there. I've just kind of witnessed that over the time. And when that feeling is genuinely there, I find that I end up getting a lot of wear out of that thing, even if it was a thing where sometimes I'll think, I don't think I'm going to wear this. There was this little gold top in Bali that just felt very charming, not feverish, not grippy, just spontaneous feeling of, this is kind of calling me. And I was like, I don't think, is this going to be one of those things that you buy in Bali and you wear one night out in Bali?
Holiday goggles, that's what that's called.
Don't end up ever wearing it again. It's just a waste of money. But I just felt, and I almost left it because I was like, don't buy the things you're not going to wear. But then it just sort of pulled me back a little bit. So I bought it and I ended up wearing it a lot. And I realized, I've got all these things that just actually make this really cool outfit with this that I hadn't thought about. And I mean, this is just such a superficial example. But we can start really refining it on everything. And there are other times where I've definitely, bought things and then been like, oh, that wasn't, really the feeling wasn't there, or I kind of went into it for a different reason. So it's good to explore this within yourself and start to be able to make the distinction between those different feelings.
That's helpful. I think that's a worthwhile tangent to go down. The other thing that came up was, do we all have some kind of greater purpose. I mean, you're talking about nature kind of getting excited when we're paying attention and, following the breadcrumbs that it's dropping and stuff like that. I think that can be a fear if you are feeling that sense of inertia or feeling a bit lost or not being able to determine which direction to go in or what feels like popping candy and what doesn't. That it can feel like, am I ever going to find the thing that's for me where I can express my gifts and attributes?
If we're taking care of that primary Dharma, we're not going to be needing that. We desire it and we prefer it. It's a preference, but we're not, am I ever going to find that? Because that immediately gives the sense of I can feel disconnection. Because if I'm really connected to myself, I'm already enjoying this moment. I'm here in this moment. I innately value myself based on the fact that I exist, that I am part of this whole. I can feel this aliveness inside of myself that has innate value. And so I'm not really desperately needing to get to the purpose. So it's not causing me stress. Then I'm staying open and I can receive and see where I'm being moved. And that purpose isn't always a career. It can be to take care of your children and to be, you're a stay-at-home mum, and that is what takes up most of your time, and that is where your primary Dharma when you have children is going to be, taking care of yourself and also taking care of them. That will be you meeting the need of the time for quite a long time. And then whether something comes after that and what that looks like, we just want to be open to allowing nature to inform us about where we can be of most relevance. When we don't have judgment around that, maybe they think podcasting is glorified and I should have a podcast and I should have an Instagram account and I don't do any of those things, so therefore I'm not, whatever it may be. We don't want to have judgment around what it is, because then we're moving into that comparison piece. We're overvaluing someone else's path and undervaluing our own. So when we can be so deeply in our own path, so interested and curious about what we can offer in the moment, we can start to see that these little moments of supporting another actually are our purpose, are of value just as much as someone who's doing something on a bigger stage or that appears on Instagram or that looks like a more, glamorous, whatever it might be, whatever is causing us to have some judgment. When I think about my mum's pathway, for example, she has primarily been involved in raising the three of us. And then as we grew up, she wasn't working and she didn't really feel like going to work. And she was able not to, that more traditional model. But she was the one that showed up for friends of hers that were depressed, that ended up not committing suicide as a result of her support, that were forever grateful for her. People that were really struggling. She had an alcoholic friend that she showed up for so much. Another friend who was very sick for a long time, and my mum was always the one that was in those moments, was there for someone who was really struggling, because she had the time, and the inclination, of course. Not everyone's going to have that, but she was available. So if she was working, who's going to be that person? So that offering that she made to that other soul is so profound, and I don't think this is the way she sees it, though I hope someday she comes to realise that, maybe by listening to this. Hi, Mum.
We love Sal.
We love you. You're an amazing being. We can so easily undervalue those kind of offerings as well. So if we take away the judgment and the comparison and what we should be doing, and instead are open to what we naturally feel inspired towards, and no one had to tell her, oh, you should go and help. And it was never a should for her. It was just choiceless. I'm going to show up for that. And sometimes these were months or years of ongoing support that was required because of the difficulty that that person was facing. And, my own cancer, she was there, came to Sydney for a month or 2 months after different surgeries, where I needed someone to literally care for me. I couldn't walk to the bathroom unassisted, I couldn't make meals. And so she was able to be there for that. And I think over time she has come more to appreciate, what she's been able to offer and the value of that. And particularly as she's seen, us flourish and move into these roles where we're, helping other people as well. My sister also does amazing work with young people, that the support that she's been able to give us has then allowed us to go in and help others, and we have been, somewhat inspired by her. So that piece had its relevance. That was what the role that she has come to play, not to, start some business or something, because then she wouldn't have been there for those moments. So I think also I talked a little bit about seeing yourself and recognizing yourself in the moment in our relationship chat. And it's in these moments also valuing yourself and seeing what you're really offering to your children. That's hugely undervalued. And we want to be valued and seen as mothers, but we're not seeing ourselves. It has to start with ourselves, of valuing that role as a parent, as a mother. And when we value it, then naturally there's going to be a sea of people that value it that's going to spread further and further, and we'll stand for that value, which is also really important.
That's so important, because you hear amongst friends who are parents, who might be stay-at-home parents, I'm just a mum. Couldn't be a more important job in the world to... first of all, your body is literally a portal between heaven and earth.
Yes.
That soul is given a human life because you brought it in for a start,
Yes.
But then to nurture that small human, to then allow them to tell you that, people can't make decisions about their body with themselves, and they're off to join the circus. That's exactly, it is
never
so
do
important.
what you want them to do.
No.
Yes.
But it does, it's worth just, acknowledging what society perceives as important and not important. Like that, the value of someone bringing up a child is one of the most important things that you can contribute, and yet it's often seen as of little value, and that you're not contributing because you're not also, doing your full-time job at the same time.
Well, when we also exist inside patriarchy, it's often the more masculine roles that are being more valued. So that means the nurturing roles, mothering, parenting, caretaking, nursing, teaching, all of those more nurturing values that don't have to be done by women, but they just have that more feminine and masculine energy exist inside all bodies. So this isn't about gender at all, but those roles are often undervalued. And it's not just men or those in male bodies or in male roles that don't value them. It's the internalized patriarchy where we as women also don't value. We who are in those more feminine or more nurturing type roles don't value them as much, and we see that by what those roles are paid as well, either unpaid or paid very little when compared with someone who is, banking or being a lawyer or a doctor or, those more traditional male fields, which luckily is changing slowly. So, it's about really taking away the judgment, because, my example of my mother, those are nurturing roles that had no money involved. Because if money was, the primary focus for her, then she also wouldn't be available. So we have to be able to be available for nature's intelligence to serve in the way that we are being called to serve in that moment, regardless of whether it's paid or not, regardless of whether we think it's of value or not. It's of value to creative intelligence, which is where the true value is. If it's of value to our own higher self, then it's got far more value than what might be culturally held in a moment.
Okay, so and when I think about like the example that you give of your mum, or maybe you're talking about a stay-at-home parent or something, because sometimes I think you can judge yourself harshly for where your money comes from. The way that how your life is funded and how you get by. Does it matter where the money comes from? Because sometimes I think we can really undervalue ourselves depending on how our funding mechanism is taking place, and the focus is more on where the money is coming from as opposed to what we're putting out into the world.
Yeah, 100%. When we think about nature, creative intelligence, it is present in all beings. So if the money is coming because your family supported you, and sometimes people feel guilty about that because their family gave them their start or was supporting them for a period of time or is supporting you right now. Maybe you're living at home in your 20s and you're studying something, or you've come home in between relationships. There can be this level of shame around that, but you have that support in your life for a reason, for a karmic reason, for your own Dharma to have that support. You know, when I did teacher training to become a teacher of Vedic meditation, my parents paid for that training because they didn't have the funds there. And, you know, I paid it all back to them, which I said, you know, I'll pay it back. And I worked hard to really have it paid back within 18 months. But the dharmic aligned thing in that moment was for me to be at training. It wasn't about how it got paid. Was it paid from my own bonuses or savings, or am I going to go into a guilt spiral about the fact that I don't have the savings for it? No, I'm just going to make it happen because the charm is there, it's aligned. And so wherever I can creatively source that funding from, and I looked at different options. I looked at taking out a loan, but then the interest rate was really high, and so, you know, I cut a deal with, you know, the home bank.
Bank of mum.
Bank of parents. And, you know, I was very privileged to be able to do that, but also that was there. That support was there. And sometimes I also hear from women when I'm mentoring them that they, you know, have been financially supported through a marriage or a partnership, and they feel some level of guilt that they haven't earned their own money. But also that was aligned for them, and maybe not permanently. Maybe, you know, things are shifting and now they're going down a different pathway. But we can't really judge how that happens. And some people, they've had to do everything for themselves, but they've learned and gained so much through that process, a different level of resilience and staying power and self-sufficiency. So each pathway is different. I don't think there needs to be any judgment around that. There's just simply moving with where you are feeling to be moved, and then getting very creative and adaptive if you need funding for that. Firstly, if it's already charming. So charm really is the way that we describe that fine level of feeling, that intuitive pull. It's a little bit more clear than just intuition. It has that feeling of charm. And that's what that you described it as, a sort of popcorn, but it can be a little bit subtler than that, where it's just this lift of pull where one thing's a little bit more charming than another. And so when the charm is there and nature's moving you in that direction, the funds actually will follow that. Nature is going to pull all of its resources to support that action which is aligned, which is ultimately being directed by it, by your own higher self. So the money is going to come. We just need to let go of the judgment around where that money is coming from, what that's going to look like. And I've talked to, you know, people when I've been mentoring them about sometimes that support has come through a government agency. Sometimes it's been WINS, sometimes it's been income support or being on a benefit for a while, which is available. They meet the requirements of that benefit. And instead of having this idea, well, I can't take the benefit, I shouldn't be on it. Well, you're in a position because of certain circumstances in your life, and here is a government benefit available to you. Well, that's also flowing through nature. Everything at its baseline is creative intelligence, all form, all phenomena. So if it's a government option offering you something, if it's available through family, let's not get too precious about something. Let's take what's available, use the support of nature that's there in whatever form it shows up in, and also be willing to ask people for support, for funding, for investment, for, when we look at Give a Little or crowdfunding, that is when a whole lot of people support some idea that you have or some cause that you're raising. So instead of being too proud to go down that pathway, that may actually be the way that, because those people are wanting to give, so it also supports them. They get to give and offer something towards a cause that they feel is worthy or an idea that they feel is worthy, and you get to have the experience of asking, which may allow you to move through some fear and to feel that kind of support. And so it can have all these other types of values as well.
Okay. I've just thought of a really annoying question to ask you at the end, but I'm going to save that little treat. I did want to ask about like people that feel really strongly about leaving a legacy, like making their mark and leaving a legacy once they're gone to be remembered by, or I don't know, leaving something of significance in their wake?
I think that sometimes that can be coming from a pure place where they feel spontaneously that arising, but a lot of the time it has to do with pride and ego, in the sense of like, I'll be a worthwhile person, I'll be recognized, I'll be made more of by this legacy that I leave. So we really have to check in with the intention around that. Is it, purely a legacy that I feel can serve and support others? And sometimes if you're, a parent and you're feeling to leave a legacy for your children, we'd prefer a legacy where they're just very well balanced and connected and, feel inspired and confident and capable in their own lives, would be the primary legacy that I, would expound or would say would be most valuable. Because if there's another type of legacy in the absence of that, maybe it's not. What kind of legacy is it? Is it one that's actually serving people, or is it one that's, serving ego? It can be pure. As a parent, you might have the spontaneous impulse to leave some kind of legacy of some kind for your children, and then that may be relevant for them to have, to learn from, or to use for other things down the track. But we do need to just be a little bit aware of where the ego is getting involved around legacy, because if we're trying to find meaning in legacy, I think we're moving a little bit away from that primary Dharma of finding that deep inner connection where we don't really feel probably so much of a need for legacy. Then if a spontaneous inspiration for legacy is coming, then it might be more aligned.
Okay. And so what about for those people who are just kind of like, maybe they're a wee bit younger and they're going along and they kind of know some things that they enjoy, but maybe they don't feel that they have a strong pull in any one particular direction. Maybe they're getting some pressure from family or otherwise that they should be doing something worthwhile and they should know where they're going and they should have their 5-year plan. What advice would you give to those people?
Well, I think if we're talking about, late teens through 20s, that's really a time where the primary focus should be upskilling, gaining skills, exploring, discovery, and being able to make mistakes. There's very, very few people that found, what has been a more long-standing, sustainable career or outlet in their 20s. It usually happens later than that. And so instead of trying to fight against that in your 20s, rather just connecting deeply with yourself and seeing what's showing up for you, what experience are you having right now, what is it teaching you, how can you best interact with it, and where do you feel called to next, just the next step. It's going to take a lot of pressure off, because the problem is, which I've also seen mentoring people in that age group, is the pressure. The pressure is causing a lot of stress. And then stress doesn't allow us to stay connected and be receptive to what creative intelligence is showing us. And we're missing the cues. We're getting stressed, lack of clarity. And so then it's actually taking you further away from getting the clarity and from moving forward. And some of the experiences that you're having are informing the process later on. So we've talked about both of our experience, which has been, it was all building to something very unexpected over time, where we could never have seen that in our 20s, and those roles weren't even really available in our 20s. And so just to take the pressure off and allow it to be a bit more fun, a bit more explorative. Okay, this didn't work out. Cool. What did I learn from this? Oh, I really don't like that thing. Or I really don't want to work with these kind of people, or I really want to work for myself, or I don't really want to work for myself. I'm actually better in a team. That is a progressive learning. If we think about progression, if we're really growth-orientated and not outcome-orientated, it'll be a much smoother and more aligned process in that time. And be aware, 28 to 30, there will be your Saturn return, and you will question things, and you might refine things, and you might make a change, and that's also on your timeline.
So a good time for an astrology reading with Georgia. It's interesting how, over those times when you're talking about kind of like gaining skills and having experiences and not being afraid to make mistakes, how, when I think about my path and your path as well, like seemingly unrelated experiences and chance occurrences all fed into what ultimately we're both doing. Like, I would never have ended up podcasting if, because of the business that I started, which was writing children's books, if I hadn't been invited to speak on a podcast about them. And it was that moment of being interviewed and being invited to speak on the podcast, and it felt like the most natural thing in the whole world. And I was like, I loved that.
I'm good at speaking.
What just happened? Yeah, but you know, that was just a chance occurrence by way of one thing leading to another thing, leading to another thing.
Well, not by chance, as it turns out.
Absolutely not by chance.
Following the breadcrumbs step by step. And also, when we're more stable and balanced, we can really enjoy the revealing, like the unveiling of where my life is leading. That's where I find myself now, is I find it exciting that I don't know what's happening next. I enjoy it. And my attitude is, let's see where it's all going. I'm open to being surprised. I'm open to being delighted. I don't mind change. I don't mind adapting. It's all good, you know, but that's come from inner stability, which I definitely didn't have in my 20s. And so now the other thing I'd recommend in that phase is to get yourself a technique that gives you the balance so that you can see more clearly, not be ruled by the stress so much, and start to find, and even just the being open to experiencing the joy of the unfolding of life. Because when we do that, we're aligning with nature itself. That's what nature is doing. That's what creative intelligence is doing, is enjoying the unveiling, the unfolding of the storyline. If we were meant to know, we'd know. But there's some joy in that. So when we can align with that, then we're really on track. Then we can really start to enjoy, find value in not knowing, and the delight of being surprised.
Okay, so if you have been going along doing that, and then you hit a crunchy bit, and you know how sometimes you, like, everything just feels like it blows up in your face. So in that moment, what do you do?
Firstly, we recognise that nothing's ever blowing up in our face. It's just that a deeper level of challenge is arising, and it's only a challenge because there's something for us to expand into. More surrender, more resilience, more capacity to meet the need of the time when things are stickier, when it demands more of us emotionally, physically, creatively. And so when we understand that nature's always arranging for our highest evolution, then we know that this is an opportunity. So let's dive a little bit deeper instead of resisting and decrying and what's gone wrong and why is it wrong and making it wrong. Because when we do that, we're making life wrong. We're saying creative intelligence is wrong. That same creative intelligence that has all of the cellular processes going in your body, this incredibly sophisticated computer that we're operating here, this nervous system, this body, absolutely everything in existence, that creative intelligence is wrong. It's not wrong. It's the perception is wrong. So we need to go a little bit deeper. It might involve surrendering, letting go, and then adapting to meet the need of the time as it's arising. So it's always an opportunity for expansion and growth and redirection potentially.
Right. And so when they say, like, no experience is ever wasted, is that true?
It's true to the degree that you're allowing yourself to take the nuggets that are being mined here and to really learn the lessons and to take that in as wisdom and embody it and move forward and really co-create and align with that challenge, with that circumstance, with that change. Then we can waste the opportunity and not learn the lesson, and then we'll probably have to repeat it. And then we're just extending. Doesn't matter if we repeat something for a while, we're just extending the time that it's going to take to get to the point where we don't need to learn that anymore. So ideally we can learn it faster. And if we're tuning our attention to that, and if we're aware that that's what's really happening, then there's more likelihood of that too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I can think of a few people who are not understanding the assignment.
And we've all been there. We've all been there at different times. And if it's a more challenging scenario, then it's going to demand more of us to get to that point. But that is ultimately also a deeper opportunity.
Okay. So this brings me to the last thing.
Oh, your
that
treat?
My treat for you.
What is it?
Well, sometimes my kids come out with the most ridiculously profound things sometimes. And so sometimes I just like to throw a question at them just to see what they'll say.
Yeah.
And I did ask them at one point, I'm like, okay, guys, well, like, what is the meaning of life? Like, what's the point? And my son goes, to enjoy the life that you've got as much as you can.
Beautiful.
And I thought, yeah, great.
Yeah,
what about you, Georgia? What is the meaning of life? What is the point?
I mean, that really is it, isn't it? It's to deepen in this moment. How do we enjoy the life that we have the most? We have to be able to be present with it. We have to go deeper with it, because if we're only living on the surface, then we're not going to be enjoying unless things are going, quote unquote, well, or we're comfortable, or they're going the way we think they should. So we're going to have to go deeper with it. And that really is it. To what degree can we be present and enjoy is going to be really determined by our state of consciousness, our degree of presence, our degree of connection, our degree of understanding of the mechanics of life.
Beautiful.
I think we got Unbound on.
I think we got Unbound on that. I think
Dharma.
we solved that.
We went pretty deep.
What's the point? What's the meaning of life? Done.
So
we can all relax.
Nailed it. No, I mean, it's an ever unfolding process, but at least having a little bit of knowledge about some of those mechanics can really help smooth the way.
Yeah, I find that really reassuring. Thank you, Georgia.
Thanks for being here.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, so fun. Thanks for getting Unbound with us today. We'd so appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave us a review and to share this episode with anyone who you think could benefit. It helps us to keep these conscious conversations flowing. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. See you next week.